Welcome back to FemSci Corner. My name is Amelia. I'll be your host. This is part 2 of my 3-part podcast that explains feminist research methodologies and how they can be incorporated in scientific fields. Last episode, we talked a lot about what a feminist methodology is, what it would mean to incorporate these things into science, and now we're going to look at some key methodologies that science could benefit from incorporating. We're going to go a little bit more in depth on specific examples of feminist theories and methodologies that have been and should be used in scientific fields. In our last episode, we talked about the difference between method, methodology, and epistemology. Now, all three of these things are highly relevant as they all kind of work within one another and apply themselves to social sciences, but also physical science fields. So, we're going to jump in with an author we've already heard from, Zara Zaidzada. Still don't think I'm saying that right, but anyway. As we discussed, she is a legal scholar, and she talked about how feminist methodologies have been applied to legal knowledges to kind of center gender and different experiences in legal situations and conversations. So this is very useful in the legal world. I believe that this could apply to science as well because, as we mentioned last time, she names many different amazing feminist theories that are highly relevant to all fields of knowledge, in my opinion. These are things that may not be new. I've read about them a lot just in my academic journey. They've changed my life. I use them every single day when I'm thinking about research and information, and whenever I'm looking into certain things, doing research projects, even just looking at stories for fun. I'm always thinking about how these things are centered and how feminist theory may be at play. So, we're going to start with 3 theories that Zara used in her article. First one we're going to talk about is intersectionality. Now, intersectionality is a very big part of feminism. It was a term coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, and it explains the complex, cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. So, when discussing centering, intersectionality asks us to think about certain knowledges and situations from the perspective of the subject. So, for example, a white woman would face discrimination as women are a marginalized group, but a black woman would experience both the oppression that comes from being black and being a woman. So there's 2 different oppressions working within each other to shape that identity and that lived experience. So intersectionality asks us to see everything through the lens of different facets of identity. This is something that is so important in any type of feminist theory. In fact, it's been said multiple times. This is a quote, I believe, from Audre Lorde: my feminism will be intersectional or it will be bullshit. And I firmly agree with that. Intersectionality is the only way to make sure no one is left out of feminism, and it applies itself to every individual. So intersectionality is a very important feminist lens that, applied to science, would help recenter different information and allow for inclusive data and research to happen. This is largely similar to situated knowledge theory, which was coined by Donna Haraway. All of these theories work very closely together, and they all really have something to do with recentering or decentering. So, coined by Donna Haraway, situated knowledges is a methodological concept propagated in feminist studies and anthropology, different fields like that, and also science, which suggests that any knowledge is informed by the location and position of the knower or knowledge producer. Okay, so basically saying that all knowledge is biased or is going to be created directly from a specific example. So, like I was saying, a white woman's knowledge production would be different than a black woman's knowledge production, or a white man's knowledge production, or a trans individual's knowledge production, because everyone has come from different backgrounds. And everyone's lived experience is going to inform the knowledge that's being produced. So, situated knowledge theory is really useful to keep in mind when thinking about science, because this is key life information, especially in the medical field or the biological field, that has historically always come from the point of white men. And so it may not apply to every individual. And this is why we need that recentering, that feminist methodology, to allow for a more inclusive science. Laura also discusses the use of feminist standpoint theory in her legal study. This one is coined by Sandra Harding, and it prioritizes thinking from women's or marginalized lives and considers these lives as privileged sites of knowledge production. So, feminist standpoint theory focuses on the intersection of everyday practices of exercising power and the production of knowledge. So, very closely linked to intersectionality and situated knowledges. These are three feminist methodologies that are essential in any field of life, specifically when applied to science. Going into research and data exploration or medical studies, even environmental studies, everything you're thinking and that's being discovered and produced is formed by your lived experience. So it is vital that these lenses are applied and acknowledgement is given to where information is coming from and who it's coming for. Biases must be accounted for, as all knowledge and information isn't going to be applicable to everyone and not even true for everyone. So those were three feminist methodologies that were talked about in the legal study. Next, I'm going to talk about a journal written by Emily Martin. She's an anthropologist. This is a really important piece of feminist science text. It is used all the time in both fields. Martin talks about the ways in which romanticized stories of certain biological concepts can sway views of gender and how this allows science to portray gender stereotypes and perpetuate these stereotypes. So Emily Martin's piece discusses the story of the egg and the sperm and how this is romanticized. So Martin's main point in this text, very revolutionary piece, is that culture shapes how biological scientists describe what they discover about the natural world, and how gender stereotypes and the gender binary inform the way scientists describe biological aspects of identity and romanticize these aspects. So again, centering where the information is coming from. Historically, the ideas of the egg and the sperm have slowly perpetuated to become this like heroic romanticized story. So, for example, in lots of different texts and scientific studies and talks, the sperm is viewed as heroic and going on this remarkable journey, and miraculous how many they are and how they're produced and how they travel. While the egg is almost seen as wasteful and kind of just waiting and useless. And by explaining the biological process in these terms, it's perpetuating stereotypes that women are inferior to men, or men are heroic leaders, or it perpetuates this gender hierarchy and patriarchy. Martin uses this example to talk about sleeping metaphors and the important feminist approach of waking them up. So this is really where the feminist methodology comes in, of waking up certain metaphors. And this is a confusing concept, so I am going to read a larger section from the conclusion of her piece, and then we will talk about it. So Martin says, one clear feminist challenge is to wake up sleeping metaphors in science, particularly those involved in descriptions of the egg and the sperm. Although the literary convention is to call such metaphors dead, they are not so much dead as sleeping, hidden within the scientific content of text and all the more powerful for it. Waking up such metaphors by becoming aware of when we are projecting cultural imagery onto what we study will improve our ability to investigate and understand nature. Waking up such metaphors by becoming aware of their implications will rob them of their power to naturalize our social conventions about gender. Okay, so essentially what Martin is saying here is that lots of metaphors like the egg and the sperm, as an example, are seen as dead metaphors or just metaphors that are kind of embedded. They're not active. She says they're not so much dead as sleeping, and we need to wake them up and inject cultural knowledge and current cultural knowledge into how they're formed and change the narrative. Because these metaphors affect and reflect social convention. So if you are putting in a scientific textbook that the sperm are mightier than the egg, that's going to perpetuate gender stereotypes that have already been seen throughout most of history. And our goal as feminists is to remove that. So waking up metaphors is a very important feminist methodology. Okay, and we're going to do one more example. This is one of my favorites we've read about this semester. I'm actually using it in application to my own feminist research. And it's from a researcher named Kim TallBear, who's an indigenous feminist researcher. She proposes a standing with feminist approach to inquiry, which allows for standing within the communities being researched to fully understand the subjects and environment being researched, as opposed to a giving back approach, which simply acknowledges and appreciates communities from afar. So TallBear does a lot of work within Indigenous communities, and it's suggesting that we stand with instead of give back. So by standing with, we're able to go directly into whatever we're researching, experience that for ourselves, talk to people who have this lived experience, and then come up with solutions or write a report or collect the data once you have that situated knowledge of the community, instead of giving back, which would be from afar, noticing someone needs help. And I don't know why, for some reason, I think about it as like just simply giving money to a cause without knowing what it's about. It's important to know the center of the thing you are trying to help. And there are so many different ways to stand with. It could be going directly within a community, to talking to one person who has a different experience from you, and then writing about that or researching it. And I think this is just such a wonderful and underrated feminist methodology. I was so surprised I was just hearing of this for the first time, because I absolutely love it ever since I've applied it to everything I've done. I'm including it in my capstone presentation. So I think this is a very important methodology to include. So those were some key concepts and feminist methodologies that have been used in feminist science and I believe should continue to be incorporated into feminist science. I think intersectional feminism especially, has a lens that is very important when applied to research and data and just recentering different concepts to kind of remove yourself from those biases. And yeah, so next episode, we're going to be wrapping it up and talking about whether or not this actually works and looking at some examples of feminist methodologies actively working in scientific fields. So thank you for listening, and I will see you next time. My sources for this episode were Emily Martin's The Egg and the Sperm: How Science Has Constructed a Romance Based on Stereotypical Male-Female Roles, Zara Saidzada, Gender Research and Feminist Methodologies, from Gender Competent Legal Education in Springer Textbooks in Law, and Kim TallBear's Standing With and Speaking as Faith, a Feminist-Indigenous Approach to Inquiry from the Journal of Research Practice.